Will this team be more disciplined than teams of the past to win close games?
They will need to be in order to win close games. So I don't know that they will, but I think that it's a requirement to get the result that we're talking about. Will Mario be burning up essential timeouts in the first quarter? Look, I will say this, and maybe you are directing what my workflow will be during this year by tracking this, but I know through the last half of last season, I wrote in the good, the bad, and the ugly more times than a couple that it was good on him for not doing that stupid shit, right? And not just, seeing somebody. I mean, okay, I'm not saying like leave a guy wide open, but if you have an 8-yard split from the right tackle to the number 2 receiver, and it's supposed to be a 6-yard split, right? So a little tighter. But I get spatially things matter. I'm not saying the details don't make a difference because they do, but like also that's not a reason for me to call a timeout. Like that, things like that. I don't think so. But he did do better with that in the last, at least third, if not half of last season. So we'll see. If it comes to pass, however, and I have to choose when we're burning an essential timeout, I would much rather it be the first quarter than the third. And even when Mario was burning those timeouts early, it was more first quarter stuff than third quarter stuff. But then also looking back at last season, maybe Mario knew, hey, I got to call some timeouts and I got to step in here now. Because if we don't get things settled from jump, it's going to be ugly, which it was, right? So maybe we give a little grace and say he knew his team pretty well and saying, I got to try to keep this competitive here up front, because if that pebble starts going down this hill, it's going to become a boulder and an avalanche and kill all the villagers, which it did. So hopefully not, but I'm infinitely better with those timeouts, those previously, burned, wasted early timeouts happening in the first quarter than the third, because, third quarter is the second half, and then you're going into the terminal part of the game where you really need those timeouts infinitely more than even in the second quarter, because, like, even if you don't have them in that second quarter going into halftime, you still have what? A halftime to adjust and a whole second half of game to play. If you do that in the third quarter, that's it. There is no, okay, we're reloading. I mean, unless you go to overtime, but you know what I mean? Like, it's much more injurious in my eyes to do it in the second half versus the first. But in the history that I know of Cristobal, from watching him coach other teams and even being here for a year, he's more apt to do it in the first quarter than the third. But also, in terms of discipline, the team will have to be more disciplined to win close games, because you can't keep, blowing coverages and assignments and things. I know it wasn't last year that this happened, but like the lack of discipline, you can even go back. You remember that play in Tallahassee in 2021? I think it was what down was that? 4th down and 14 on the last drive. You remember that one? Where Andrew Parchment from Cypress Bay, who, like, the last time that he made a play on a football field was his junior year in high school, because he's 6'5" and 200 pounds, so he's tall and that's all, right? And this is a kid who, like, bounced around in, Power 5 programs and, like, whatever, because he has the physical build, but he never really put it together. But then that Andrew Parchment caught that ball on 4th and 14. They end up winning that game, right? So if we're looking at lack of discipline, it was not only last year, right, at all, by any stretch of the imagination. But there are things that will need to get better, because that was a close game last year's game, they blew our doors off by 6 touchdowns like we did to them 2 years prior. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about, 2 years ago, that was a close game. And that mistake, that lack of discipline to run the defense appropriately, cost Miami the game. And as things go, hopefully we're able to clean those up, and hopefully that will also impact certain specific games, like that darn North Carolina game, because they beat us 6 of the last 8 times. North Carolina? Because I do, because I looked it up, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Bro, but those games have all been close, even last year with Drake May and everything. Like, he's lighting everybody else up. They're putting up 9 million points against Appalachian State, and then that's a 4-point game, right? But You make a couple plays, you don't make a couple super plays, and all of a sudden you win those games. So that will be required to win those close games. I need to see it before I believe that it's going to happen consistently, though. But it's a great question.
Yeah, and certainly concerning timeouts, any of us who know and love football and know how the game's played and how it should be managed and can do a little bit of math in our heads know when timeouts should be called and what should they be preserved for. However, in this case, I'll go along with Cam in regards to having a little bit of grace and seeing when the team is competitive and playing those types of games against quality opponents, are those timeouts going to be used in the proper schematic way or logistical way, I should say, more of a logistical concern in terms of when you save and utilize those timeouts versus just trying to build a program, build a team, get them, their heads right, their fundamentals right, and not letting things slip out of their hands early in a game or in a drive. So there is that consideration.